Okay. I'm in my FD signifier era. I've got to complete the homage. There we go. Okay, so let's take stock. Ohio is like Chernobyl. J.K. Rowling is laughing her way to the bank, which is apparently filled with goblins. Violence is roaring. People online are talking about it in the most toxic way possible. And relevant to this little space on YouTube, a bunch of activists and artists are becoming increasingly disillusioned, which I think is bad. And that's just at the time of filming. So now I have to tell you about the Canadian philosopher who in the 1960s predicted social media and this exact problem we keep running into. I'm Chris, welcome to the channel. I'm talking a lot slower now than I did in my last video, in which I spoke a lot quicker than I did in the one before that. Look, I'm experimenting with tone. Sometimes I talk fast, sometimes I talk slow, and can I not do that? Can I not experiment with tone? Little piece of shit. Everything feels like it's happening at once. There's just so much to keep track of. And when something happens, it's barely around in our collective consciousness for even a few days before we move on to something else. I am not the first person to observe this phenomenon. Major events, internet drama, celebrity gossip, discourse, we're like sponges constantly being filled and wrung out with information about everything. And then comes the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. It barely gives us time to take any stock. And some of this stuff leaves genuine damage in its wake, from the big political stuff to the smaller, more drama-oriented stuff. And it's like all at once. Things hardly feel sequential anymore. We've had this conversation before, at least YouTube has. The last time we had it in a really big way, in a really particular way by my estimation, is when Bo Burnham's Inside dropped on Netflix. The film is about a lot of things, but an enormous running subject of examination is the internet and what exactly it does to our brain. Not the specific content that you'd find on the internet, but the medium itself and how it's specifically fucking with us. The high point of all of that is Welcome to the Internet. The song sends a clear message that it's not so much the content that's troubling, but the availability of absolutely everything instantaneously whenever we want. That's the quality of the internet itself. The film got people to go back and dig up some of the interviews Bo Burnham did on a previous press tour, and that's where, in my opinion, things get really interesting. Look, I didn't get to have a Bo Burnham era on this channel, okay? So just pretend that this still feels relevant and give me just like all of the clicks. I'm kidding. This video isn't about Bo Burnham or Inside. I'm just using him as a springboard. Because he said this.
Subvert some of that trolling and lack of decency, right, is better remembering how to be humans when we're using the internet. And I guess we probably have time for one last question after this, but can you talk?
You can't be a human on the internet. You're not gonna out-tweet Donald. You're not, it's his medium. What are you talking about? We're having a national conversation by throwing fortune cookies at each other. They're to, it's the mediums, That's the problem, it's probably not the people. You know what I mean? That's the problem. It's people thinking it's people versus people. And it's mediums. It's people literally sliding fortune cookies to each other, trying to have an argument about complex, giant things. No wonder it's uncivil.
This spoke to me. It's really incisive, and it provides an interesting framework to understand how the medium of the internet is impacting us. Is it the folly of man that's responsible for the dumpster fire of online relations? Or is it something about the internet and social media itself? But Bo Burnham didn't get this idea entirely from his own head. As it turns out, he left a little Easter egg at the beginning of his film. Not a lot of people caught it, but it has a lot to do with what he was talking about and where we are as an online society. Hey, Humphrey. It's my dog, Humphrey. What a good boy. Yes, you're a good boy. See that right there? Right there. I'm not good at looking at the camera either. Yeah. Do you need somewhere to sit? Marshall McLuhan, Who's that guy? He was a very famous Canadian philosopher who rose to prominence in the mid-20th century. His work is an enormous cornerstone and foundational pillar of media studies. And it's in his book, Understanding Media, where he coins two very important phrases. The first is global village. And the second, I think, is scrawled in the very first chapter. The medium is the message. You've probably heard that before. Basically, it means that content may impact us, but the medium that content belongs to has an even bigger effect. New technology and media create change in our day-to-day existence and engage with different basic senses of ours. You know, sight, sound, touch, so on. One medium activates a certain part of our brain and basal senses differently than another. So what happens when you invent language? People start to connect more specifically and orally. Well, then you invent the phonetic alphabet. Expression becomes less broad and more narrow. Now we can more precisely express our own individuality. So according to McLuhan, the individual becomes more of a fixture in our collective consciousness and society. And so then what happens when you invent the printing press? The printed word becomes accessible not just to elites, but everyone. And it becomes a primary form of communication, which is a radical change from when communication was mostly sonic. Now we're writing letters. Sound and its immediacy is less emphasized in our communication and connection with one another. I mean, it's still there, it's just de-emphasized. Because print is visual, and now the visual sense is heightened globally. And our relationship with time changes too. Sound is like that, but it takes time and forethought to write, read, and receive physical letters. For that reason, as a method of communication, print can feel more procedural. McLuhan proposed that this was a big precursor to the assembly line, the way in which print makes us think more procedurally.
We owe a lot to the book. The assembly line of mass production, that, for example, comes to us from the book, from the printed line where things move along and happen one at a time.
McLuhan also says that this isn't just technology forcing a change in human habit and ability. He says the very engagement with this medium and all media fundamentally changes our psychology. The human mind doesn't remain constant through advances in tech and media. It is altered by those media on a deep level, specifically because different senses are being heightened or dampened when we engage with something like print or television or internet. And of course, if true, this would have a huge impact on society, politics, economics, interpersonal relationships, you name it. You know, just the entire future of humanity. No big deal. The medium, far more than the content, is the message. This was a really radical idea at the time, and it turned Marshall McLuhan into a kind of celebrity philosopher. Okay, so let's keep pulling the thread. What happens when you invent radio and telephones now? All of a sudden, the auditory comes back to the fore. The balance of our senses with regards to global communication is altered yet again. Keep pushing the limits of that technology, and then you get TV, the marriage of sound and sight. And TV is far more immediate. McLuhan says all technological advancements move along this arc. We keep combining more and more of our senses within a single medium. And these media keep getting faster and faster until things seemingly happen all at once. He called this the global village.
The world is now like a continually sounding tribal drum, where everybody gets the message all the time. A princess gets married in England, and boom, boom, boom go the drums. We all hear about it. An earthquake in North Africa, a Hollywood star gets drunk, away go the drums again. It is no longer one thing at a time, but wherever possible, everything at once. 40 or 50 operations happening at the same time, controlled and synchronized exactly by preset tape. Notice the shift in the image. From the assembly line stretched out, events taking place one at a time, to the modern automated industrial complex where things happen all at once. Bang. Not a line, but a field. And this applies not only to products, but to people. The line, the individual. The event was the book. The field, the all at once, tribal drum, the new medium.
Yeah, the whole tribalism thing is definitely problematic. Still, this motherfucker predicted the internet. In that clip, McLuhan is of course talking about television and electronics in general, not the internet. Those technologies were already connecting us so quickly and so thoroughly that we could start to access a little bit of everything all of the time. But a little bit later on in his career, he begins to theorize that the global village would begin to turn into something more aptly described as the global theater. In fact, he argued that we started the transition to the global theater the moment we put satellites in space.
We now have the means to keep everybody under surveillance. No matter what part of the world they're in, we can put them under surveillance. It has become one of the main occupations of mankind, just watching other people and keeping a record of their goings-on. This is the way most businesses are run. This is called public relations, and it's called audience research. And this is around the clock. And this has become the main business of mankind, just watching the other guy.
And invading privacy.
Invading privacy, in fact, just ignoring it.
Now, we weren't just so connected that we were in everyone's business. Now we have an acute understanding that we are being watched, recorded, assessed, and policed at any given moment. All the world becomes a stage. This mother didn't just predict the internet, he predicted social media. Thing is, McLuhan doesn't think the global theater is such a great thing. He said that being globally connected would most certainly lead to more division. Every conversation can be intruded upon. Everyone is simultaneously held accountable to everyone else. Things become less civil. More connection in this sense will maximize discord and disagreement because there's no such thing as talking amongst ourselves in smaller groups or in smaller communities. It's just one big village and everyone's listening.
Global village is not created by the motor car or even by the airplane. It's created by instant electronic information movement. The global village is at once as wide as the planet and as small as a little town where everybody is maliciously engaged and poking his nose into everybody else's business. The global village is a world in which you don't necessarily have harmony. You have extreme concern with everybody else's business and much involvement in everybody else's life. It's a sort of Ann Landers column writ large. And it doesn't necessarily mean harmony and peace and quiet, but it does mean huge involvement in everybody else's affairs. And so the global village is as big as the planet and as small as the village post office.
Takes 30 minutes to get to work on a horse and carriage. Then we make a car, it takes 15 minutes. Great. Make a faster car, great. Cleaner energy, make it quicker. Why should we apply that to our social lives? Why should we apply that to our conversation? Is there any proof that streamlining this stuff makes it better? You can talk to 100 people, now you can talk to 1,000. You can have a conversation. We're applying a capitalist whatever streamlining logic to literally our emotions and our souls. And that just happened.
Yeah, Bo's definitely been reading some Marshall McLuhan. And because of the instantaneous nature of both the medium and technological advancement, we don't have ample time to adapt to this or the change in our daily lives. Everything is happening all at once, light speed, and humanity is having a hard time processing it. Just out of thought, If we as human beings are destined to keep advancing technology to increase the speed and connectivity of every aspect of our lives, and if this is leading us to an increasingly large theater of discordant performance and discourse, well, it's like the pressure of two tectonic plates. You bring them together so quickly, so fast, with so much pressure, and it breaks. The march of technology won't stop, and it'll just keep sowing division until society breaks. I'm getting that funny feeling. We're doomed, you guys. I mean, doom, of course, is a big subject of my last video, which you should definitely watch, maybe at 0.75 speed. But in that video, I was exploring how the balance of the content that we're exposed to affects our sense of doom. This video is not that. The content isn't the message here. The medium is. Right? This video is about the superstructure that is responsible for the content and its platforms. Where is it sending us? Are we really locked into a technological singularity of increasingly short-form, vapid content? Are we destined to be torn apart? If nothing else, because it breaks communication, allowing fascism and genocide to slowly creep in through the cracks. So if you've ever driven a car, you know that it can be a very emotional yet impersonal thing. You're in this comfortable little cocoon and you've got your coffee and your music and your stuff is everywhere, or at least my stuff is everywhere in the car. And so is everyone else. They're in their little cocoon too. Except you don't see people in the context of their own spaces. You just see metal boxes and lights, sometimes the greased out figure of like a person through the windows. You're all engaged in this communal activity because you all need to work together in order to get to where you're going safely and efficiently. But you don't ever see the faces of the people behind the wheel, let alone their full context. Honestly, when you're driving, they don't really feel like people. They feel like machines that are dickheads. Cars enclose us, keeping us grounded in our own experience, but pushing us away from the other, despite it being a group effort to travel effectively. It's a hyper-individualized medium applied to a communal practice. This might start to sound familiar to you. It's a metaphor. And since the other is so depersonalized and only ever seen in the context of their current present actions, it's easy to assume that they're really operating in bad faith. And that might be true. They may be acting in bad faith. But it's also very easy to act out and drive in a way that endangers others in a bid for retribution. Road rage. It's easy to do because the other person is reduced down to a point. They're not someone struggling with depression. They're not under pressure from outside forces or rushing to the hospital. They're a metal box, a dish metal box. The very medium of cars is influencing how we see each other in that space, more so than the individual drivers. The medium is the message. And doesn't this all remind you of social media? On platforms like Twitter, we sit in the real world, perfectly enclosed and in tune with our own complex experiences. But everyone else is reduced to a tiny little profile picture and like 180 characters. Or however many characters there are. I don't tweet. But you should still follow me on Twitter because I might tweet. And wouldn't that just be juicy for you? I don't know, once I hit 4,000 watch hours, maybe you guys can write my first tweet. Or second tweet, I don't know. Leave a comment if you like that idea. But on platforms, especially like Twitter, the context of everything is collapsed inside the moment, the tweet, the driving violation. And we feel emboldened to act in ways we never would in person because to us, the subject of our rage and disdain isn't really a person. They're the tweet itself.
By the way, at this moment,
Right.
we are on the air, and on the air we do not have any physical body. When you're on the telephone or on radio or on TV, you don't have a physical body. You're just an image on the air. When you don't have a physical body, you're a discarnate being. You have a very different relation to the world around you.
So that's what this is doing to me?
Yes.
But unlike in the physical world, on social platforms, we essentially have the ability to remove drivers from the road. And we hop on that chance. I'm talking about, whoa, there he goes, a white guy talking about cancel culture. Geez, certainly haven't had enough of that. Look, to continue on with this metaphor, some drivers should absolutely not be driving. But everything about the medium makes that decision-making process as reactive and as malnourished of context as possible. And we know this, so we police and self-police and replicate hierarchies that we are actively trying to dismantle, like the police. There can be no trust here. And as I said earlier, trust is the only thing that can enable us to come together and build any kind of meaningful change. Disunion doesn't happen because we're challenging privilege or other people's actions. It happens because we're skeptical of each other's good faith, almost as a necessity for survival in this medium. The short-form nature of certain content platforms is killing our efforts to add crucial humanity back into the picture. There's a reason why TikTok and Twitter feel especially bad.
We're having a national conversation by throwing fortune cookies at each other.
Yeah, I think that this is the biggest issue. Operating in a technological space that prioritizes short-form content makes it harder and harder to add in necessary nuance. That's why I like video essays. And it's also why you're probably never going to catch me tweeting about anything other than a new video. Unless, of course, I get to 4,000 watch hours. Anarchists want money too, jeez. Look, long-form content can add in tons of complexity and nuance and flesh out a take that would have otherwise been dragged on other platforms. But it's true, long-form content doesn't exactly dismantle the panopticon. It's still a global theater. Anyone can watch a video in bad faith, and anyone can make a video that misrepresents your video, and you can go on very long-form debate streams, and the problem gets worse, not better. Still, I can't help but wonder about this thought experiment that I've been kicking around in my head. Delete YouTube from the earth. What would the decrease be in cancellations and shaming and harassment online, if any? Okay, so bring YouTube back. All right, now delete Twitter from the planet. Oh God, would that I could. What would be the decrease in harassment then? I mean, I'm just spitballing, but I can't help but think that there would be a far greater reduction, right? Twitter is just not the space to have a good conversation. It's a space where faith goes to die, because it is so easy to mistake the global village for humanity. I do it all the time. It's easy to look at the massive waves of toxicity and hatred and violence coming from people online, oftentimes over some silly shit, and think, well, if that's what we're up against, and if that's what people are really like, and if there's that many of them, well then this whole thing just isn't worth it. We haven't affected much change, and we never will. But I think it's important to remember that while online spaces are great for disseminating ideas, and yes, making some crucial connections with others based on those ideas, and maybe even building a community, it's not the best place to do a litmus test for how much positive impact we're having, or how much value we're creating. Real world impact is hard to measure, basically because of the butterfly effect. You know, good old-fashioned chaos theory. An idea over here, an idea over there. These are seeds that we plant. It takes time for them to take root and grow and spread. There are literal master's degrees devoted to how to radically and systemically change big institutions in their dynamics of power within the context of cooperative ownership and ecological sustainability. From Ivy Leagues. That was definitely not a thing 10 years ago. I'm not even sure that's a thing 5 years ago. And I'm not saying that that's going to change the world, and I'm not saying that online discourse did that, but I am saying that ideas spread in ways that we can't perceive or immediately detect. And when we spread those ideas, reactionaries will demoralize us in so many ways, not least of which because we typically view the initial effects of our actions as the only effects of our actions. But I don't think that's true. We want to build a future, and 10 seconds from now is not the future, nor is a week or a month or even a year. And that sucks. That sucks. Look, I'm not sure if the online world can be saved, and that may very well be a function of the medium. But we're not trying to save the online world. We're trying to save the real one. And in the real world, change is very much possible. I understand that the line between online and offline is blurry, and that the term real world is murky at best. What's real, what isn't? I'm just saying that change will be rendered invisible or seemingly inconsequential if we're always fixing our gaze on the social media space. In my opinion, online spaces that are public, as in not DMs, are for brainstorming, propaganda, and news. The whole point is to share information and then take it out there with you in the daylight or in your DMs, I'm not trying to be ableist, and build some fucking change. Because when we step into our local offline communities or step into private chats among trusted members, we collapse the global into the local. And we can effectively move towards something like praxis. If we stay here, unabashedly public, and use that space as a metric for progress, we'll just eat each other. And deconstruct everything and never try anything because we're afraid nothing will ever work. Hey guys, what should we do about this problem? Hits different on a Twitter stream than it does in a private chat. They're still important in both spaces, but don't just look at the feed to determine our progress. Look, I always want to provide solutions and steps forward on this channel, but I can't always do that because I don't have all the solutions. Newsflash, white guy on Twitter doesn't have the answers, but we all do collectively. Not all of us white guys, all of us leftists. Don't you, that's bad faith reading. Don't do that. So, I don't know. What do you think? Do you have any ideas? Is there some way that we can push back against this toxicity? Is there like some piece of the puzzle that we're missing? You know, leave some thoughts in the comments. Not just because it's good for me and the algorithm, but because I'm a small enough channel, at least for now, for this to be maybe not such a globally theatrical place down here in the typey zone. But before you do, I'm going to leave you with something. Oh, wait. Did you think you were going to get an ending? Like, that was past Chris. He lied to you. There's no ending here because there's no such thing as an ending. Things don't end. Everything that was and ever is and never will be just sort of extends on infinitely into the future. You only ever feel that it ends because your attention is shifted away from it, giving you a sense of finality, of terminality. And we are on a medium that is designed to rip your attention away at its earliest possible convenience.